name's Jillian Jacoby, and this is for our early hominid project for the Anthropology 102 class at San Diego Mesa College. The early hominid that I chose to research was the Orrorin Tugenesis, which lived between 6.2 and 5.8 million years ago. The name Orrorin means original man. So for the first question, where was the fossil or fossils from this species found? The fossils for the Orrorin Tugenesis were found by a French research team in the Tugen Hills region of Kenya in 2001. So like we talked about, Orrorin means original man, Tugenesis means of the Tugen Hills region, so it's the original man of the Tugen Hills region. That's what the name means, because that's where he was found. Are any of the fossils from this species famous or well-known skeletons representing the species? I didn't find any well-known or famous fossils that have been given names like a Lucy or anything like that. None of them are that well-known. The fossils that were found were definitely interesting enough to be given its own classification. It was unique enough because it was a combination of part ape and part man, enough like it was a different ratio unlike any of the other species that they had uncovered before. So they were first classified in 2001, and they're the only species in this classification. Who found the fossils and how old was the fossil dated to? So it was a French research team that found the fossils, and it was a paleontologist named Brigitte Senut and a geologist named Martin Pickford, and they discovered the fossils in that Tugen region in Kenya, and that was back in 2001 when they first discovered them. And the first fossil is dated between 6.2 and 5.8 million years ago. What's the estimated brain size or cranial capacity of this hominid? On AustralianMuseum.net, it stated that the brain was about the size of a chimpanzee's brain, but there's not a ton of information about the brain specifically for this species, just because there's not a lot of information with the fossils that were found. It didn't indicate a whole lot about the brain size. It indicated more about some other parts of the body, which we'll discuss later, but that's all we really know, is that the brain was not huge, size of a chimpanzee. What does the anatomy of the hominid suggest about the style of locomotion? What anatomical features on the fossil indicate or suggest a particular style of locomotion? So this particular species is really interesting because there's something called the Orrorin Tugenesis controversy, because I guess it's kind of controversial when you're looking at the fossils if it was bipedal or if it were a tree climber. And the reason is because of the different fossils that they've found, like the posterior part of the mandible, several isolated teeth, 3 fragments of a femur, a partial humerus, a proximal phalanx, a distal thumb phalanx. It's kind of like competing information to suggest whether it was a tree climber or bipedal. For example, in the femur, the head is spherical and rotated anteriorly, and the neck is elongated and oval in section, and the lesser trochanter protrudes medially. So this all would suggest that the Orrorin was bipedal, but then there's other information that would suggest that it climbed trees. For example, the distal pollical phalanx is of human proportions and typically would be associated with tool making or tree climbing. It indicates grasping abilities useful for climbing trees. So with all of this mixed information, it's technically inconclusive whether it was bipedal or not. We're still looking for some more information on that one. What do scientists believe the diet of this hominid might have been based on characteristics of the teeth? The Orrorin species had small teeth compared to its body size. It did have large flat molars, which suggested that it sustained mainly on a fruit diet, but it says that it also may have been an opportunistic meat eater. So, I mean, I guess if some meat presented itself, it would go for it. If it is known, what traits of the hominid and its species suggest potential social behavior and cooperation? So there's not a whole lot of information about the social behavior of the Orrorin Tugenesis. Of all of the fossils that were found, it was only about between like 5 individuals, and they found 21 fossils total. There were originally 12 fossils found, and then in 2007 some more were found to make it like 21. But of that information, you know, they weren't able to find out a lot of information about the species and its social patterns, but they did find some twigs and sticks that were easily modified, and also some simple round stones, which may have been used to find food or break down nuts. basically these tools suggest, and they're similar to the types of simple tools that modern chimpanzees would use today. So that's kind of the level of what we're working with socially and mentally, and kind of their capacity of what they would do. Okay, thanks for listening.